This is episode 668 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing. I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to have a returning guest, Carla Kugler. She is the president, executive director, chief cook, and bottle washer at the Associated Builders and Contractors here in New Mexico, a construction trade association representing the construction industry. Welcome back to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Carla.
Glad to be back. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, well, we'll start off with a little bit about yourself and your kind of the trade association you represent. Just remind folks who you are and what you do here with the Associated Builders and Contractors.
Well, Associated Builders and Contractors is a national association. We are a commercial trade association. There are about 67 chapters throughout the United States. We are the one that services New Mexico. We do service the state, while the majority of our contractors are in the metro area. We do have contractors in Roswell and Las Cruces and Farmington and Gallup and Grants and Las Vegas. And we've got about just under 200 members, so 200 companies within the organization here statewide. Our primary function is, lots of things. We try to be the one-stop shop for construction, whether that's government and regulatory affairs. We do advocacy. We also do business development and some networking. And one of the largest things that we do is training. So big on workforce development. We have the largest multi-trade state registered apprenticeship program, and we believe strongly in workforce development and building people.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show because, of course, New Mexico's workforce and developing those workers definitely a challenge for everybody, regardless of industry. But first thing I want to talk to you about is your national organization has come up with, I don't know how many years they've been doing it, but it's been a decade or so, the Merit Shop Scorecard. And folks can just find this online at meritshopscorecard.org if they are inclined to look it up. But talk about what this index is and kind of how New Mexico finds itself in this index of all 50 states.
So this scorecard is an annual assessment of policies and things, states initiatives, and they judge on a few different criteria. So they judge on prevailing wage laws, right to work laws. They do public-private partnerships, procurement issues, definitely construction job growth, and workforce development initiatives, and career and training initiatives in general. So, and they take all of that information, they put it together. They have sets of criteria and judging, and then they come up with a list of how we score within that process. And sadly, we have been the bottom 10 for quite some time. We did not grow. We stayed, I think, at 47, if I'm not looking at the scorecard, but we were 47 last year, and we're 47 again. So.
Well, time to get to work, Carla.
I know. Well, and it's funny, they do say it is not a assessment of the chapter's advocacy efforts or workforce efforts, that it is truly the state, but it is also for me and our membership a time to try and motivate and change some numbers.
I feel the same way about my colleagues in the state policy network, where they're in most of the other 50 states, and it's always tough to say, hey, New Mexico, we're towards the bottom again. So let's briefly run through the various metrics, and we'll just note New Mexico's poor performance. But PLA mandates, what does that mean?
So PLAs are project labor agreements, and project labor agreements are primarily they're agreements that a government entity, in this case it's the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, that force contractors to sign, that behold a contractor to a collective bargaining agreement and a union policy for the lifespan of that project. So it is basically kind of making a contractor become unionized for the sake of that project.
All right. Next up is prevailing wage.
Prevailing wages are wages that are set by the state. In our case, they are set only by collective bargaining agreements. So again, they take all of the union contracts and their wage rates. They form them all together and produce a document that that lists the wages that all contractors are going to pay on any type of state project or any municipal project, and that is all set by union wages.
All right. And that one is something that during the Richardson years, so going back a few years, they changed the calculation of the prevailing wage to make it more generous to the unions, more essentially a bigger payday for the unions.
They did. So I think what they did is they kind of stripped out the process that used to be done is the state would then request wages, a wage survey from everyone, right? Throughout the state, any contractor could send their wage rates. They would collect that information, make a general average, and then produce those wage rates. And it got narrowed to take in only collective bargaining agreements, only wage rates that are determined by collective bargaining agreements.
All right, right to work. I can't believe I'm asking somebody else about this one, but tell us what right to work is.
So right to work is truly that, right? It is the right to be able to not unionize, and it's to be able to conduct work in which the way that the employee and the employers want to do.
All right, and
The right to, I could also call it the right to choose.
yeah, public-private partnerships. Now this one, I mean, and I know that there's been bills in the legislative session. By the way, we are rated by your publication as an F on public-private partnerships. A lot of people on not just the left but also the right have some suspicions about public-private partnerships. How do you believe that they could be beneficial, and has the legislature been willing to wade into this issue in a substantive way, or is it kind of just some very vague stuff?
I think they have, for the last probably 10 years, they have, I guess my explanation would be dip their toes in the water of public-private partnerships. So in order to conduct a public-private partnership, it truly is that, where a public entity would go into a partnership with a private entity in order to get something built and done. And then they come into an agreement together. It is joint funded, and then that they kind of both share the risk in the project, and then also share the benefit of it. And for us, they've been there's various reasons of why they've been hesitant to do it. I think sometimes the state entity, we have a lot of pushback from, quite honestly, again, AFSCME, which is the American Federation for State and Municipal Employees, about how those people within working on those projects would be affected, and in general, commingling of public and private funds. It has been very successful in other states. Now, that being said, it doesn't always mean that it's going to be successful in New Mexico, because we all know that things that work in New Mexico, or things that work elsewhere, quite often are not successful here. But the fact that the state has been hesitant to move forward on these projects are, it's disappointing.
Yeah, and just kind of one additional factor that public-private partnerships tend to be a little more common in uh, states where you have real fundamental challenges in infrastructure. such as the DC area or New York, or these big cities where you have massive congestion. And New Mexico also has a lot of money, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. We have plenty of money for capital outlay. One can argue that there are specific conditions in very crowded, congested regions of our country where the money is not as readily available, and you need a public-private partnership.
Correct. That is true. And I think if they were if public-private partnerships would have been successful in, I guess, in its initiatives in general, it I think during the Susana Martinez administration, when times were a little leaner,
Right.
and I know that those conversations came up, and there was many times it was proposed, and it just never seemed to take off. But to your point, we are, right now the state doesn't necessarily need the partnership. They're looking more to just go ahead and get the work done because they've got the money for it.
All right, now workforce development and career and technical education. I lump those in together because they're broadly workforce related issues. Uh, Talk about just a few of the details about what New Mexico does and what could we do better in terms of both workforce development and career and technical education.
I believe that the state is making some strides. I think that our legislators, I think that our communities are now much more accepting of the fact that uh, to look at career and technical education as a way of lifting people up out of poverty, instead of the traditional college route. Not knocking the traditional college route at all. It's just not for everybody. And I think the state is finally making some strides to invest in that process. But quite honestly, we still have a long way to go. Whether or not that is a state, I mean, it's a state issue. I just don't know if it's going to be able to be solved by the state. I don't think that necessarily, I believe that, government is not, going to be the end all means of solving all the problems. But, the focus on career and technical education had not been, or creative ways, right? We are always looking for, while we have a state registered apprenticeship program, and apprenticeship is great, that is not the only way. And I believe that we need to start looking for an all of the above approach to workforce development training. And it's been our our state and our municipalities have had they're slow in that growth process.
So some signs of life in those two areas that New Mexico's moving in a maybe a little bit better direction.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, our I think our biggest issue is people.
Yeah.
We can't get people in. No, so I mean, truly, there's not necessarily any amount of money that's going to solve that issue to get people into the trades. If we don't have, if we don't have people here, people are leaving. Our children are leaving. We're not going to
Well,
move
of
the needle.
course, and I know this may be a little bit one step outside the boundaries of our conversation, but of course, there's workforce participation rates in New
Mm,
Mexico, and whether those folks can are physically able to for sometimes age related reasons or drug use related reasons or
hmm
educational related reasons. There's all kinds of factors there, but uh, I, Rio Grande Foundation has long uh, taken the approach that workforce participation rates in New Mexico need to be a very high priority in boosting them. But we don't really hear much talk about that in Santa Fe. The Legislative Finance Committee's done some good work on that, and there's been some talk in those circles, but nothing tangible from the governor, the legislature when it comes to workforce participation.
No, it's true. It needs to be a much larger conversation, and this goes across the board, not only with construction. We had we have had a conversation with our Secretary of Workforce Solutions, and she describes it as kind of going to if you were going to go to a game, and there's people on there are people on the bench. There's obviously people in the field that are playing and they are in the workforce. There's people on the bench that are waiting, and maybe possibly they just need a skills up. They've got people in the stands, and we seem to have a lot of people that are roaming around in the parking lot. We don't know, why they're there, what they're doing, but they're not even in the stadium. So, that conversation is we need to have more of that conversation as a state in whole.
Yeah, I would argue it's the cart. Either people are pulling the cart and there's more folks pulling the cart, or there's more folks in the cart and fewer people pulling them. So uh, I've seen that metaphor as well, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly that is a critical issue and something that could impact in a positive direction our broader economy. Of course, keeping New Mexico, young people in New Mexico, an issue as well. So a lot of factors there, but we're gonna just leave that conversation, and you can again check out the Merit Shop Scorecard .org. You can find it there, or a blog post by yours truly at airsoфenchantment.com. But it's a very, very good index. It talks about a lot of really critical issues in New Mexico's and nationwide in construction, and where things need to improve in New Mexico. Now, moving on, an issue not addressed in that particular report, but something that we've done a lot of talking about here on Tipping Point, New Mexico, and at the Rio Grande Foundation is the $6 billion in unspent capital outlay that New Mexico is sitting on, and the broken process, but also just our roads are deteriorating, bridges deteriorating. I don't know if you have any good data points to highlight for people. Saw one report by some trial attorneys saying that we had the worst roads in the country. The Journal just had one about us being towards the bottom, but not quite at the bottom. Uh, how bad is the problem, and how can we get to some of this $6 billion to put it forth towards roads and bridges and the like?
Yeah, no, it is a problem. I think that it has been a problem, quite honestly, obviously for some time, and now that we do have this money that is ready to be spent, I think that conversations for our legislators need to be at the procurement process, right? The way in which the money gets spent. I think we have an antiquated system. We have the process where someone will design the road, engineer, and then they kind of come up with a ballpark guess. And of course they're experts on it, but they come up with a ballpark guess of how much that is going to be, and then they goes out to a regular bid process, and then that bid comes back and it is much more than originally intended. So then, that municipality, the Department of Transportation, whoever it is, has to go back and start that process all over again as far as allocating, getting the money, acquiring it, and then going back to bid. And that slow process of procurement and how the work gets assigned is it's been a very, very slow the our state, and I say our state, it's not ours only, but bureaucracy in general and the government in general can be slow to spend, and that is very evident in the way in which our roads are getting done. Any
Now,
kind of infrastructure, quite honestly, bridges, same thing.
I'm going to venture into what may be uncomfortable territory for you, but we have obviously the bidding process and whatnot, but we also have a arcane way of allocating the money in a more fundamental and political way, where the governor gets a certain amount,
Yeah.
legislators get a certain amount. Uh, there's no prioritization, there's no analysis. We're coming up on the holidays. They call it the Christmas tree bill, and it's not in a positive light. I think Christmas tree, it's a good thing. We like those things.
Yeah.
Not when it comes to the way we allocate capital outlay dollars. And if you can talk about that problem.
Well, I mean, I wish I could tell you I have a solution. You're absolutely correct, and I think you know there tends to be pet projects and what certain legislators can will push for. There isn't a strong system of evaluating, having long-term goals and strategy behind how money gets allocated. And that would very much help the process and how it gets done, but it just doesn't. And in fact, luckily, I don't say luckily, but in years previous when times were leaner, you know, also they would only allocating a portion of the funding for the project. So I mean, you can't build anything with a portion of the funding, not funding it fully to get it done. That's not that's not effective either.
Right. Fair. So I'm going to ask you a related question, which is uh, one of the issues that we just talked about is the labor force and the workers available. Where does that fit in terms of the various problems, and what is your industry competing against in terms of those workers itself? And by that I mean there's welfare payments, so sitting at home not doing anything.
Mhm.
But there's also a lot of money flowing into things like the Inflation Reduction Act and federal laws, and that have really promoted green energy and those kinds of things. I've got
Mhm.
to imagine that a guy or gal putting up solar panels could also be the same guy or gal uh, putting asphalt down on the road, or some other construction project that might address the roads and bridges issues. So, um, just talk about some of those workforce issues and what you're competing with.
Well, so I mean, workforce in general. I think one thing where we're competing against not working, right? We're competing
Right.
against. I mean, one could argue we have you know in construction, it is it's a safety issue, for us to employ anyone that is, we have marijuana laws now. Marijuana is legal in New Mexico. We do, construction has a carve out where it cannot, they can make it a policy that you cannot be, you can have a drug free policy that is limiting the pool of people that are available for construction. I think that there's just a general limitation on available employees, and that's across the board everywhere. Um, with the Inflation Reduction Act and primarily with that and the green energy, there's also quite a bit of regulatory. Uh, there's some regulatory handcuffs, if I will, to help a contractor get that work done. One, it is prevailing wage on I'm sorry, on private work. So all of that inflation reduction is prevailing wage work, which on private work, which has never been really a mandate before. That can be a challenge for contractors that have never had to deal with that process, to have to kind of figure out what that looks like. There's also apprenticeship requirements. So there's the apprenticeship. I say there's apprenticeship mandates. So it reduces the flexibility that contractors have to get that work done, which has been, there's been lots of different guidance that the federal government has had to come out it feels like with every new piece of guidance that the feds have come out regarding the process of the Inflation Reduction Act funding, there just leads to more questions. So that has been a a problem for our contractors to navigate and get that work done. Again, there's funding out there, but in order for them to get the owners to get the proper tax credits, for contractors to be in compliance, there is a lot of questions. So there's been a lot of hesitation, and it's been very slow to roll. So as much as you'd like to say, oh, there is a bunch of money out there for all of these projects, the way in which they are constructed contractually leaves a lot of hesitation, and it gives pause until until clarification is provided.
All right. Well, fair enough. So a legislative session is right around the corner, and we've obviously discussed a number of issues that New Mexico could improve upon, but uh, voters didn't exactly rattle the apple cart, so to speak, very much in our recent elections. It turned out to be here a status quo election. So, given some of the things that we just talked about, what do you see yourself spending your time doing up in Santa Fe when the session begins? Any specific issues of note?
We are going to be obviously, again, we're going to be watching how the money is allocated for infrastructure. We are going to be watching uh, the funding sources, and uh, the process in general. We will be. One of the things that our contractors, just as much as the rest of the business community, will be the paid family medical leave act.
Right.
That is something that has our contractors a little nervous as to how that's going to play out once again.
Yeah. So that's your primary concern or priority.
Yeah, right now, because of and I hate to say it like this, but there's a lot of money out there. It's trying to figure out how that money is going to get spent. What the process is going to look like. Our contractors are ready to build. Of course, there is there's a workforce shortage, but that's not where they'll work around those problems legislatively. That's not going to be an issue. We will be looking to see if they will be any consideration for updating the process, right? If they can update that procurement process in a better fashion, but that the paid family medical leave will be our right now, as far as I know, the strongest advocacy efforts towards.
Well, that makes two of us, so we'll be right up there with you, as we have in years past, pushing back against that particular mandate. Of course, the legislature, with the money they have available, could easily make it a carrot rather than a stick for businesses and
Mm-hmm.
offer tax credits or
Sure.
something like that. I'm not particularly optimistic that would be the way they go. We saw a overall move to the left politically with our legislature, and between the Democrat primary and the general election, it ultimately saw a lot of those moderates moved out of the Democratic Party when it came to the legislature, and more progressives moved in. So it's we're gonna have our work cut out for us on that one for sure.
That is true.
But the construction industry in New Mexico, would you say that kind of business has to be fairly good right now simply because of the amount of money available? You could more are there plenty of jobs available? I know you talked about workforce development a little bit. Before we dive into that briefly, just would you say that the health of for New Mexico, understanding that we're not Texas, we're not Arizona, we're not some place that's really growing fast, but relative to like recent years, are we doing okay, broadly speaking?
The jobs are there, the work is there, right?
Hmm.
So now it is finding people to fill those jobs. And I know that our contractors are vigorously training to try and get their people up to be able to bring in, because you can only bring in so many um, you know entry level positions at a time. It's a safety
Sure.
aspect. So they're trying to do that. They've been making great strides within their own training efforts to bring in people. But I mean, construction is strong right now. In fact, I mean, it's to the point where I think you know an issue that the state is having is also competing against private sector work. There is a lot of private sector work going on, and I have many contractors that'll tell me they'd rather take a handshake deal on a private job than sign a contract with the state or municipality because it's riskier.
Mm.
So the state is now competing against private sector, which has not been that has not been an issue for some time.
Well, on one hand, that warms the cockles of my soul
Hmm.
because very rarely does New Mexico's private sector kind of grow at a rate that is not the same as the state. Normally, the state is such a big player. But on the flip side, I drive on the roads. I'm less less worried about the latest store or warehouse or whatever they're building on the private sector.
You and me both. I get it. It's good. But again, that's where I think the state could be a little bit more self-reflective in how they are attracting contractors to bid this work, right? To be friendlier for the for businesses to want to work with them, because right now they haven't, to your point,
Right.
they haven't needed to be, they didn't need to be friendly. They could just kind of, they call the shots, and it was lean times, and they would just do the work, and now that's not the case anymore.
Well, I that phrase, the state could be more self-reflective. We'll just put that on a poster somewhere, Carla. Thank you for that. That's a very, very politically, very well honed way of stating that kind of thing. So, last last question. I know your organization does a lot with apprenticeships and trying to train the next generation of workers. Uh, we're seeing just broad declines across the country in the birth rate. We're seeing declines in the number of students in New Mexico's schools. Uh, anybody who's Everybody should be concerned about the next generation of workers because we're going to have a smaller and smaller workforce supporting not just financially but physically the needs of retirees and other generations that aren't going to be in the workforce. Just talk a little bit about the problem that your industry faces and some of the programs specifically, and if people are interested, know a young person who's interested in the trades, how they can maybe engage with you.
Yeah, we are taking an above all, an all of the above approach for engagement into our industry. So, in the last 5 years, I think I have visited more middle schools than I have even than we have in years past, just to increase that interest at a young age. So that is something that we have taken on strategically from our organization's standpoint, is to try and engage with students at a younger age. Quite honestly, much like the our European counterparts, where they've been doing that and engaging in trade based, no matter what that trade is, learning throughout a young part, a good part of their secondary education. So we'll be making those initiatives. We're facing for our the people out there, again, to go back to the point of engagement. I don't understand where these people are and why they're not working for whatever reason, whether that's a gig economy and they are, getting by doing, I hate to say that, Uber Eats or whatever they're doing, right, in their own little way to get by, and not not coming into the workforce as in a rapid rate, because we have an aging population within construction, which is significantly impacting us. So we trying to get students in any way possible. I don't think I'm answering your question, but we're going to need to, it's going to take all of us to be able to encourage our next generation to get into the occupations that are, I mean, very good self-sustaining jobs.
Well, I guess my only addition or point of clarification is if folks know a young person who's interested in doing that, how do they reach out to you? And generally speaking, how do people find out more about you or your organization as
The
well?
easiest thing is our website, and that's abcnm.org. That gives a broad overview of what we do, the apprenticeship program. They can always come and see us. We are, our training center is on Broadway. It's 2821 Broadway. We're in between Manal and Candelaria, and come in and tour. We often give tours to student groups and high schools, middle schools. And yeah, you can find out all more about us. Send them our way.
All right. Well, thank you, Carla, and thanks to all you do for freedom within your industry in New Mexico and getting the construction industry to work a little better in our state. And we'll see you in Santa Fe during the session, if not before. So thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.